welcome to Shifting Lanes. My name is Hanson. Thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to another episode of Before You Buy. This is a segment where I talk about the car's features that I like, some that I don't like, what's it like to drive the car, so on and so forth. So hopefully after you watch this video, you can have a better idea so you can make a better and more informed decision before you head to the dealerships. Take the car out for a test drive and also maybe eventually buy the car. For this episode of Before You Buy, you find me sitting in the 2019 Lexus LC500. This is the V8 model. This is the flagship Lexus. This is the most expensive Lexus car in existence outside of the Lexus LFA, which is no longer being produced. But this is the V8 model. Actually, it's the cheaper LC car, believe it or not. They do have the hybrid as well, which is about $4,000 to $5,000 more expensive. And this one starts at $92,200. This one, as equipped, dials in at $106,000. And that's because it comes with the convenience package, the 21-inch forged wheels, heads-up display, limited slip differential, premium surround sound system, and of course it's got that very important performance package, which comes with the sport seats, the carbon fiber roof and door sills, active rear steering, active rear spoiler, and also you find Alcantara all around the interior. Now, my Shifting Lanes cohort Gregson has actually reviewed this car before, and I've reviewed the hybrid version, so if you're interested in seeing those reviews of the previous year's cars, you could see the links down below in the description box. Without further ado, let's begin with what I really like about this car. So first we have to start out with the visuals, because this has pleasing proportions. You know, Aston Martin did it best with its golden ratio, and this might as well be a Japanese Aston Martin DBS. If you just look at the front, it's got this striking hourglass grille, and looking at the rest of the car, you have that aggressive stance. You have big wheels. In this case, I have 21-inch forged rims that really fill in those wheel arches. This one has the carbon fiber roof. You can see that floating roof design. We've got door handles that disappear. The LC500 has an active spoiler that deploys after a certain amount of speed. And if you look at the headlights, and I have to spend a good amount of time talking about the headlights and the taillights because of how special it looks. Now, most cars, you see a very large headlight that basically encompasses the good portion of the front face of the car, but in here you see how small the headlight actually looks. There's a system of 3 very bright LEDs clustered in this one corner. You have this razor thin daytime running light, and you have this teardrop shaped turn signals. But what Lexus has cleverly done is basically add some color match panels onto the headlight unit so that it looks like the headlight is more integrated to the rest of the body. And if you look at the rear taillights, the taillights look drastically different compared to other cars, because on most cars you see the red glass that covers the rear taillights. Right now you don't see any sort of red glass, so personally I think it looks a bit like Optimus Prime's face. And when you turn this on, you get an infinity mirror effect here, so it looks like you're just staring into the abyss. This is a look that's not really replicated in any other cars. There are absolutely no bad angles on the outside of this car, and the party continues inside. These are some of the best looking seats ever, because the way the Alcantara just kind of meets the leathers, just how soft it feels, how wonderful these bolsters are. I just love these futuristic looking seats, and they're so comfortable to sit in. And of course, this has heated seats and also ventilated seats all along the seating surfaces. Side note, this is how powerful the ventilated seats are. Let's hear this. It's pretty cold. Up front, we've got this 10.3-inch infotainment display. It is a beautiful, crisp display. I think this has a fairly high pixel count. And you control all of the inputs via this touchpad that's conveniently located right beside the shifter, and also all of the volume knobs. And speaking of these knobs, we've got knurled buttons, smooth buttons, metallic buttons. Mickey Mouse ear dials, just nicely textured surfaces everywhere. The grab bars, the armrests are just so nice to the touch. We've also got a tachometer that slides to the left and right. I don't know why that's important, but since I can do this, I now must have this in every car that I drive. And best of all, we've got a 5-liter V8 underneath the hood that makes 471 horsepower and 398 pound-feet of torque. This goes 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds, and it also has an exhaust note that doesn't sound like your mom's Lexus. This car sounds so good. And let's talk about what it's like to drive, because there's a couple of really cool features in this car that comes included if you get the performance package. Now, this comes with the active rear steer. Now, there's not a lot of cars that have active rear steering. The rear axles are able to turn the wheels slightly, so it helps you in steering situations. So like when you're going at slow speeds, it'll actually counteract the steering angle for your front axle, so that basically that makes it feel like a much smaller car. You have a smaller turning radius. And when you're going at highway speeds, it'll somewhat match the steering angle for the front axle, so that it feels like it's a much more agile car. So larger cars like the Chevy Tahoe may have this equipment available, again, to kind of help to reduce the size of that long wheelbase car. So this is a really long car. This has a 113-inch wheelbase, which is like some SUVs, and this is only a 2+2. This also has a limited slip differential. What does that mean? Well, that means that you're gonna have more grip around the twisties. Most cars only bother with an open differential, but with limited slip differential, it limits the differential in torque between the left and right sides of the rear axle. So all that means is that you could go around the turn faster with more traction. I also like the 10-speed automatic transmission in this thing. It has super fast shifting, it's smooth, and I feel like it could read my mind at certain times. When I'm like coming off the brakes real heavily, it'll downshift very quickly just so it knows that I'm going to be on the throttle again. And when I'm not driving aggressively, it'll follow a routine shift program so that it tries to achieve the best mileage as much as possible. The LC500 also has huge brakes. I mean, huge. It has 15.6-inch rotors up front with 6-piston calipers, and it's got 14.1-inch rotors in the back with 4-pot calipers. Huge braking power, because I mean, this is a fairly heavy car too. I believe it's about 4,500 pounds. That's a lot of mass to bring down to a stop. As for the ride and handling, there's a little bit of body roll. You do feel the heft of this car a little bit in the twisties. The active rear steer adds to the nimble nature of this car. It makes this car feel a little bit more agile, but compared to other sports cars, this isn't really going to match up. I mean, there's better cars out there that cost a lot less, like the Chevrolet Corvette Grand Sport, or even the Mustang GT with the Performance Pack 2. And even if you want to go even cheaper than that, also the Toyota 86 or the Mazda Miata, those are going to have much better road feel compared to something that's $106,000. But don't get me wrong, this is the perfect grand touring car. This is an awesome GT car. You take this on long road trips and on long stretches of highways and some twisties, and this is going to feel awesome. And I actually took this to Lime Rock, Connecticut this past weekend to check out the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship Series and to also learn more about the Lexus racing program. They've teamed up with AIM Vassar Sullivan this year, and we got a chance to talk to the drivers, talk about the RCF GT3. And if you want to learn more about the Lexus racing program, please check the links down below. But I went on that road trip. It was 2.5 hours each way, and I can tell you right now that I was not fatigued at all at any point. Again, the ride is so comfortable. The seats are so great. This has ventilated seats, which means that on long road trips, it just reduces your fatigue just because you're so much more comfortable driving. So kudos to Lexus making a proper GT car, and this might be the best GT car out there for the price. Alright, so I've gone on long enough about the good stuff about this car, so let's start talking about the things that I don't like so much. First of all, the 21-inch wheels kind of give a pretty rough ride. Now, that's not really a knock on this car. I mean, that's just big wheel things, you know? Any car with big wheels and very tiny rubber is going to produce a fairly rough ride. Now, on smooth surfaces, this car handles and rides really, really nicely. But when you go over like those bumps, there's not a lot of compliance between the low profile tires, so as a result, you're going to have a rough ride every once in a while. Another negative on this car is the rear seats. I mean, it's a freaking joke. I mean, this is a 2+2, but realistically only about 2.5 people could sit in this car. I mean, if you've got anyone taller than 5'6", then they shouldn't sit in the back seat unless you hate them. I also don't like how simple the backup camera on this car is. Now, I've reviewed a bunch of cars which has 360-degree view cameras. This is a $100,000 car, and for it to just have a simple backup camera, I think that's a little strange. Just confusing things to not find in a really expensive Lexus. I also don't like this touchpad. This touchpad is so finicky to use. I mean, it's somewhat accurate, but when you're driving and you're trying to find your options and like try to toggle through Apple CarPlay, which Apple CarPlay is a touchscreen interface, and to put a trackpad to manipulate CarPlay just seems counterintuitive and like a step backwards for what Apple CarPlay is all about. So again, to use this and to try to focus on the road, I feel like it's a little bit dangerous to use at times because, again, you don't want to take attention away from the road. And lastly, the heated seats, ventilated seats, and heated steering wheel, it's all embedded into this infotainment system, which you have to use the trackpad to change. And when you're trying to change that when you're driving, again, it's very difficult to use. You would swipe a little too much to the right or a little too much to the left, and you would miss what you're trying to change. So again, not good execution. I'd prefer to have those buttons readily available on the dash somewhere as physical buttons rather than something that's embedded into the infotainment system. So with all the likes and dislikes, is this car worth over $100,000? Short answer, yes. Long answer, this car is built with some quality materials and some really awesome craftsmanship and a lot of attention to detail that's really not found in a lot of other cars. This also has some serious performance car chops. I mean, this has a massively powerful and awesome sounding engine up front, the 5-liter V8. This also has a limited slip differential, big tires, big wheels, active rear steering, and it also has huge brakes. And on top of that, the visuals. I mean, this car just looks downright gorgeous. I think it's a beautiful piece of art. The big downside is at this price point, there's a bunch of other awesome cars that also deserves your attention, like the Jaguar F-Type R or Porsche 911s, or even if you want to spend a little bit more money, the Mercedes-Benz AMG GT. And if you're trying to choose between this Lexus flagship LC500 against those other cars, then wow, you must have a really tough decision to make. And I'll just leave it at that. Hopefully you learned something from this video. If you did, please consider giving us a like, hitting that subscribe button, and also hitting that notification bell so you can get notified anytime we make a new video. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Shifting Lanes channel. I review new cars, we have project cars, and we also attend a lot of driving events. So if you care about any of that, please give us a subscribe. With that being said, I'm going to wrap it up right there. My name is Hanson. This has been the 2019 Lexus LC500, and I'll see you next time.